only going this way because he has an ego. So,
Which is in check.
yeah, it's in check. So anyway, we're gonna start over here, and everybody just tell everybody your name and when you were diagnosed, or what, if whoever you're here for was diagnosed, and then if you don't want to be in a picture, tell us at that time. Because Tracy's taking the backs of people's heads right now.
But I can crop anyone out, whoever doesn't.
Okay, so go ahead, Nelson.
My name is Nelson Colon. I was diagnosed June 8th, 2016, so Friday will be 2 years I had it. It's been affecting my hand, my arm, my right arm. It carries every week. I can still move it, but it's every week. And lately I've been getting tired a lot. I don't know what's that.
I'm Elena, his wife,
And Jenna, his daughter.
his daughter.
I'm Joe Cullum. I was diagnosed 5 years ago from a trauma. I'm getting to the point of my limbs are going. It's getting scary.
My name is Doreen, I'm his wife. I don't want to be in no picture. No, you said no stinking. Right.
Okay, Joe,
I'm Ed Sconzo, and this is my wife Maria. Maria was diagnosed with PLS in 2010, and then it turned into ALS as the years went by, and that's where we are.
What is PLS?
Primary lateral sclerosis, the upper part, and then not the lower, and now it's the upper end.
Hello, my name is Michael Marcella. I remember the first time I fell. I was chasing my great niece Daria in her grandma's living room when I fell. Debbie came running in to see what happened. I was fine. I got up and started chasing her again. I have PLS since September of 1999, almost 19 years ago. PLS has a slower progression than ALS and is confined to the upper motor neurons only. Isn't that correct, Teresa?
You are
I
correct.
saw 5 neurologists before coming here. I was first diagnosed with ALS at North Shore Hospital, but Debbie and I wanted the correct diagnosis. We went to Manhattan and saw 3 neurologists, including Drs. Mitsumoto and Lang, before coming here. At first I didn't come to the support group, only Debbie came. However, after a while I came too, right, Teresa?
That's right, Mike.
I come to the support group to find different ways to deal with my illness. I take suggestions when I think they're useful, like taking the SCAT bus to come here because I no longer drive. However, as Teresa knows, I miss driving. My motto for this year is the same as last year. No falls for 2018. The last time I fell was 4.5 days ago. Teresa knows I don't like falling. I am lucky to have a thick Sicilian head. I hope we never knock over again.
Couple of those.
I hope everyone has a great summer, especially you, Teresa.
Thank you, Mike.
And I'm Debbie, I'm Mike's wife.
Hello, I'm Joel Fishkind. I was diagnosed a little over a year ago, and I went to a series of hospitals until I accepted it. I was up at Sinai in Columbia, and I went up to Mass General because they had the new program. But it is what it is, and we decided to come out here to Stony Brook. I've been through the Steinbecker Clinic, and now we're coming to some of the groups that they give help right now. This is my wife, Ollie.
And I think you get the award for traveling farthest.
Oh, it's an hour and a half.
Wow.
Where's
I'm
from
Paula
Mass.
Walsh. I was diagnosed 2 years ago, and I've been coming here too. I'm great.
I'm Paula's husband, Shelley. I'm here to support.
Carol?
Yeah.
I'm Carol, I'm the occupational therapist at the clinic, here to kind of educate myself a little more. And I rudely ignored that and learned something else.
I'm Tracy, I work at the chapter, I'm the regional director for the local care teams. I'm a nurse at LPN by license and MPH, so I'm here to support Cindy and Teresa. I try to visit as much as I can, usually like once or twice a year.
I'm Cindy, I'm here to be supported by Tracy. And it's great to see some new faces and our usual people that we see, and it's just a wonderful, it's a privilege to be part of this group because it's a wonderful environment in which people are so supportive of each other. So, thanks for all being here tonight.
So tonight we have a guest speaker. Frank and I have known each other for a long time, right? I mean, probably about 10 or 12
I'd say
years.
probably 10 years.
Yeah. When I met, well, yeah, we may have known about each other, but not knew each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, Frank has been, Frank has a checkered past. What he's here about,
I like that though.
what he's here about today is similar to what the first thing I ever met him, but it's completely different, right? So Frank is a PT by trade. He went to school, became a PT, and then went into construction or, oh shoot, sorry, that's my brother, I'm gonna have to call him back. So then he started helping people adapt their homes.
Right.
And he did the whole thing, from the doorway to the ceiling and everything in between. And then he focused on different things. And now he's focusing on the most important stuff. But what he's really focusing on tonight is not what he does for a trade, but what he's learned while participating in helping people modify their homes and their lives. He's going to tell us all about the mistakes people have made, the downfall, the upgrades, and stuff like that. And then he's going to tell us a little bit about a few other things.
Yeah, a few other. Thank you, Teresa. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, so it sounds like everyone has been a part of this group for quite a while.
No,
And
we
that-
actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 new people. So
Four new
there's
people.
something-
Four new
something
people.
that
So you are super fortunate in that. So I've been around disability issues in one capacity or another since 1997. So 21 years, about half my life. And Teresa, and this is honest truth. All the professionals that I know, she's like I was telling Sonny on the way over here, she's one of the standouts. There's just something special about this lady that will, if you're new, you'll come to know, and if you've been around, you already know. So I appreciate your trust in having me here, to be able to speak to all of you here tonight. I don't take it lightly, because I understand that everyone here is in a tough spot. And so if I can impart a little bit of 21 years of experience to make your life a little bit better, then I think we'll have a good night. So we want to talk about the proper process for home modifications. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty. We'll leave some time. Maybe people have specific questions. But we're going to talk more. I want to kind of go up a level about how do things flow. And that's, we're actually taking down a little. We're going to go to the foundation of the building tonight. We're going to go down to the structure and say, if we can get this right, then everything else kind of falls into place. And I think, again, after being in business for myself for 15 years now, I think we're going to touch on the thing that is overlooked probably most of the time. And if we get it right, we can catch a lot of problems later on. So let me just give you a little perspective as to, kind of where Teresa actually did a very good job. I have a twisted path, and most people really blow it, but that was probably as close as it comes. So, so first and foremost, I'm a family man. I'm listening to the wives and the husbands, supporting their spouses and their parents. I'm married for 15 years. I have a wonderful wife, 4 sons, 11 to 2. So the first lens that I look through my business is first is as a family man. So that piece is very intimate to me. I'm a business owner second. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I see a problem and I want to fix it. I want to come up with solutions and say, how do we get this done? How do we make it better, right? But with that said, St. Paul wrote, we all want to live well, but our first aim is so that others can live well first. And in my company, Frangeli Consulting and Design, really, that's what we're really kind of aiming for, is to add value to people's lives in a really kind of in a tight spot. When my phone rings, it's usually nothing is a happy story on the other end. There's chaos, and we need to come in and try to figure things out. So the company is staffed with draftsmen and architects. We're staffed with virtual reality operators, so we're utilizing some really neat technology so we can see the spaces before we actually design it. Just move this over here 1 second. Yeah, so we'll have a little mini demo. I know this is sort of entry level to the marketplace, and sort of this kind of being talked about, and my kids are playing with it and gaming, but we're actually using it as a tool. So later on we'll kind of play with this and be able to visualize some things a little bit. Over the past 15 years we've been in business, we've either designed or executed somewhere around $35 million worth of accessible projects in either new construction or new home build, or in some capacity we've designed and or built, or in some combination, a sizable amount of work and experience that we've digested over the years. But it's unique in that it's evidence-based. It means we take the medical model and we overlay it on top of the problems in the home and the barriers, and we're able to look at the equipment and be able to kind of see forward past and say, what's the best solution here for this particular problem based on the evidence, right? So it's through a very guided, process-driven method that we come up with some of our answers. So, to my twisted road, Teresa's correct. I was and still am, a licensed physical therapist. Right, I wore the lab coat for a bunch of years. I ran North Shore Manhasset's cardiac rehab program, and one day I had a client come. The mother fell on the floor. The husband tried to pick him up. He fell. They laid in a pile for 15 hours until the kids found them, and they're up on the floor. And I'm talking to the daughter, and the daughter says, I say, you should really think about grab bars and a ramp and a this and a that and da 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 da. And she said, that's great, but I can't find anybody to put a grab bar in. And I said, really? I could do that. And she said, you can? And I said, yeah, I could fix that problem. And so that's where the company was birthed, on the 404 Monte in Manhasset, and we started this small consulting company. And we said, how do we keep people out of the hospital? How do we keep them from falling? But what happened very quickly was my phone rang and said my husband had a stroke. My wife fell and had a brain injury. My husband was diagnosed with. Can you do? And I said, yeah, we can do that too. So we just went out and solved problems. And we did that for about a decade. So we were builders, right? We put screws to wood and brought the electricians in and ran crews and did what we needed to do. And we got to about 2012 and said, we've kind of, as you're a business owner, you kind of synthesize things, and you said, okay, well, we've done all this work, we've done all this experience, but what is really the value? And the value was not so much running the crews and the logistics and the project management and making sure that it all looked pretty at the back end. It really was, well, what do you do and why? And so we just held on to the architectural work. And so now we only operate as a professional design firm. And in a few more years, I can sit for my, to take the test to become a licensed architect in New York State, because I have nothing else to do with my wife and 4 sons and everything else. But that's kind of where we're at. So you kind of see who's talking to you, and I've worn a lot of hats over the years, and I want to be able to kind of synthesize this down to where I think is really the most important pieces. All right, so my goals for tonight is really threefold. So we want to talk about the foundations for successful living at home with a special need. And what I found is that if we can do that, we help you to improve your quality of life. And if we understand the proper process surrounding home modifications, that really will give you financial safety in this space. Okay? And then if we utilize the right tools so that this process becomes easy and safe, it'll give you peace of mind. Because there's nothing worse than having a problem, spending time, energy, and money, and it's still a problem. That's a nightmare. Because most people have one shot at getting it right. People are fundraising for it, or their emotional tolerance for construction is just, we got to get it right and get it done right once, right? So we're going to be, hopefully when we leave here tonight, I can help you with a little bit of quality of life, protect your wallet, and give you a little more peace of mind at what you're doing. And it could be something very simple, or maybe complex. So, this quality of life, success at living at home. We've seen there are three fundamental building blocks that if you can get these areas right, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but it'll sure give you a better shot, a better crack at successfully living at home. So you have to figure out your legal and financial concerns, right? Not my space, but I see enough of it. Disability, elder law things, asset protection, things of that nature, right? And if I get anything off here, you give me the hook.
Mm-hmm.
So we got legal and financial concerns. Caregiving, whether it be your spouse or hired help, medical, non-medical, in-home nursing care, kind of that staffing, that human resource part. And this is tough. Strangers coming into your home and matching and meshing with personalities and so on and so forth. But if you can get this right, and this is where most people stop. They see this and they say, okay, we have our nest egg, we have to defend it, that makes sense, we've got to hire the lawyer, he's going to write up all the trusts, and we're going to get all this right? And that makes sense, we're going to spend money there, and then, okay, caregiving, all right, well, maybe my wife is, or my husband, his shoulder's starting to blow, and he keeps picking me up, and I have to, maybe we need a little help. And so we start interviewing, right? So that's kind of obvious. But this is the missing part. Because if that home doesn't work, if you can't get the equipment through the door, if you can't get into the shower to take a hot shower and take care of hygiene issues, and be able to have quality of life and be able to go back and forth and do these things and in and out of the house on a regular basis like it was pre-diagnosis, boy, it's tough. Especially as function starts to decline, right? So, and this is a really, really hard thing for people to do because it's like it's almost like people they're fighting against this disease process, and it's if I do this, then I'm losing the battle, and I see it again and again and again, and most people by the time they call me should have called me months and years prior. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Teresa was alluding to earlier about something that we're playing with in the office, and that is going back and interviewing our book of business over 15 years. Because it's one thing to listen to me. It's another thing to listen to a peer who's living through it, who's across the minefield and says, hey, come this way. So this is Teresa Zimmerman dealing with severe MS now for about 8 years. We worked for her about 3 years back. And she's going to talk about this exact point and making changes. And I asked her specifically, to talk to this point, to talk to you about that thought process. And this interview went on for about an hour, and just pearls came out of the woman's mouth. So we want to eventually start, compiling our interviews and posting it as a free resource for people to, kind of like a blog page or a podcast where you can listen and maybe glean some information. Maybe that helps you, right? So, kind of a free thing. So this is a piece of advice from Teresa, who, sorry, what did I say? Teresa, oh, God forbid, Tina.
Understand how they feel because we put it all together probably a lot longer than we should have. Number one, because we didn't know where to find a place. We wanted to do it right. And number two, because it does mean you're coming to terms with the fact that this is not something you can put a Band-Aid on and it's going to go away. That unfortunately mobility issues have gotten worse and you need to do it. The piece of advice I can give is, once you do it and you see how much anxiety it relieves, how much physically easier it is, so then you have your energy to do the things you want to do. If all of your energy is spent in taking a shower in a bathroom that doesn't work, then you don't have that energy for your kids, for your family, to just do what you need to do. This is something that can be fixed. There's so much with so many diseases, whether it's multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, a stroke, even just old age, that can't be fixed. If you're 90 years old, that's terrific. You're not going to go back to being 40. It can't, it's not, there's so much that can't be fixed. So fix the things you can. A bathroom is something that can be. And the benefit you will get from it, the peace of mind, the fact that you can have energy then to do other things, it's so worth it. So worth it.
Great.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone articulate it like that, but it's true, and there's reality to that. So we've become excellent as a company of creating order from chaos. Phone rings, my husband's coming home in any week now. They're telling me discharge is coming. We live in a split in Plainview. He's in a wheelchair. Oh my God, what do we do? The hair's on fire, right? So we come in and we go through our protocol and our process and we spit out the answer. And then there's order, right? We pop it together. And that's because we're very good at defining a problem and then putting a system around the problem. See, chaos reigns in most people's life in this space because the families don't really understand the construction process. Now, I understand. Did I hear over here you said you were an electrician? And I'm sorry, you were a project manager, carpenter.
I'm a carpenter my whole life.
Okay. So
And I'm doing handicap wheelchair lifts.
Yeah.
All day long.
Right. So you're feeling me. You got it.
I got it.
Yeah. So when there's a protocol, right, and in medical terms, right, Teresa, when there's protocol, that's for safety, right? That's for predictive outcomes. That's for, right, there's for order, right? So, but the average homeowner is used to getting their roof replaced every couple of years, their windows replaced, siding, upgrades, call the local contractor, get this done, and get a couple bids, I need a deck, basic stuff. But not this. This is different. So there has to be process. And you cannot take out the OT, the PT, the person that has intimate understanding of your particular functional ability, the caregiver's burden, right? What do they need to do, right? And then tie that together with not only today, but where are we going to be down the road? What is the trajectory of this thing? And it's our job to be ahead of the problem, not to be fixing for today. It's to be fixing over here. Or maybe to put a plan in place for over here. So, in my practice, we use what we call the 4 Ds. We go through discovery. Medical discovery is first. That's the foundation. We go through diagnosis of the property. Where are the areas of pinch? Where is the areas that imposes immobility or enhances the disability, right? We then come up with a design based upon that. And then if necessary, we may direct. We may direct and oversight, provide construction oversight or something along those lines. So discovery, diagnosis, design, and then direct. right? We don't build first and then try to figure it out as we go, right? We go through a very specific process. And that's a take-home. If you're taking notes, it's okay that you're not, but if you remember that, it's medical discovery, understanding function, coming down to what does the property look like, and then going through the design, then to the execution. So am I with you so far? Feel good? Okay. So let's just go through a couple of definitions. And what I want to do is show you, there's the residential space, which is kind of like the Wild West, right? Nobody's ever really good at dealing with contractors. It just stinks, right? So, but in the commercial space, there's process in place, right? So, can anybody tell me what the scope of work is? Anybody has ever heard of scope of work?
Includes all the trades.
Overall project?
Overall project, right? So, according to the United States Department of Defense, right, this is a real term, scope of work should be specified in clear, understandable terms, the work to be done and delivered by a contractor. So, understandable terms, the work to be done, to be delivered by a contractor. Preparation of that scope of work requires an understanding of the goods and services and the ability to define what is required in very specific terms. It's what's going to be done, right? So that's going to be an important kind of term that we're going to use as we go through. It's what is going to happen. That has to be defined first. We don't shoot from the hip and figure it out. So this is the process. It's always the process. You design it first, you create the scope of work first, and then you execute. Most families call the builder up and say, my husband's coming home from the hospital and I need my garage converted. Can you come give me an estimate? And the builder shows up and he's looking at your garage and he's waiting for you to tell him what to do. Frustrating? Is that frustrating? That stinks. Because you're trying to figure that, you're trying to pull this out of right? And it's really not the contractor's job. The contractor's job is to execute what the scope of work is. You have to have that first. You have to have this first. When that's there, right? So this is the part where we're going to start talking about how do we protect your wallet. When this is here, you're in a defensive position to make sure that everything, your needs are met. And it's done at competitive prices. Without this, it's the Wild West. It's just the Wild West. You need an advocate, and that usually comes with defining the scope of work, right? To piece this together, to make sure that your specific needs, and it's not only your needs, it's the needs of your loved ones that are probably providing care as first line, right? So, and this is how public works happen. Right? They put out a request for proposals, and they go to the architects and engineers first, and they say, over here at Stony Brook, we're going to build a new whatever, and they get all the architects and engineers, and they choose their architect and engineer, and they go through their piece for 18 months or whatever, make their decisions, and then they put out a request for proposals for contractors, and they take these construction documents, and they say, give me a price. If every job you walked onto and they gave you electrical drawings, how happy would you be?
Very happy.
You'd be thrilled, right? If you had framing diagrams for everything, how are you going to, you come in, you're looking at this roof, we're going to build what? Huh? We're going to build this addition, what do you want? If you had a set of drawings that were good, wouldn't it be helpful?
Show me a set of drawings.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
35 years.
I understand, you're correct. But at least the intent is there, right? May not be perfect because field conditions, I don't want to go there, but yes. But this is the process. Now, layered on this is something called evidence-based design. And it's a term that has been generated here by the Center for Health Design in California. And it's typically used in design and construction in the commercial medical spaces. Commercial medical spaces. We've hijacked it because it's perfect. Because I believe that the home today is an extension of the facility. The hospital is going to discharge you home. They want to keep you home. That your home, in essence, I think, my theory, and we'll see, But the administrators eventually will come to the fact that if you can't get in and out of your house to come for outpatient treatment, and you can't get into the bathroom and be able to take care of personal hygiene issues, and you keep bouncing back because you get a urinary tract infection or something that could be avoided, and because the house doesn't work, the hospital, you know. So we have to take the same thought process and come back to the home, because we said evidence-based design is the process of basing decisions about the built environment on the research and to get the best outcomes. So it's understanding what's going on in your life. What is your function? What is the equipment? What does the caregivers need to do? Right? So, and so for very specific accessibility needs, you have to look at who and what is going to occupy the space. Because if you neglect to look at that, you'll miss it. And you'll make mistakes, and you'll spend money, and you'll be frustrated with your contractor, and he'll be frustrated with you, and it won't work because it wasn't designed right. And so in our practice, we always say we're going to pray for the best, but we're going to plan for the worst. It's my job to be ahead of the problem. It's my job to have contingency in place. Because if it doesn't break right, you don't want to be scrambling again. You want to say, oh, okay, no problem. You just step over to here, you deal with it, but you're kind of over here, and that foundation, right, is at least stable underneath you, and it's not shifting sand. So, now this is something that we've kind of coined, and we've been using in some of our writing and publication and whatnot, and we call it the 4 hallmarks of a reasonable transition to home. And the more we kind of play with it, the title I think needs to be a little bit changed, a little bit different. But there are 4 really pillars of things. There are 4 things that always need to be looked at and viewed in order to evaluate whether something is viable or you rejected the solution, right? And so here they are. We're always looking to maximize independence in the least restrictive environment. We're always looking to maximize independence in the least restrictive environment, right? My job, if we look at a functional scale, and we draw it like this, and let's say here's independence, and let's say over here is dependence. And then we come across this scale and we say we have supervision, contact guard, min assist, mod assist, max assist. So if I meet you here, and if I can deploy either a piece of equipment or something minor in the house that takes you from being someone helping you, let's say, lift your leg up and over the tub because you may be losing some function in your right leg, and now your wife is doing this, and I can come up with an answer that says we don't have to do that anymore, and I get you over to here where she's just watching you, we win. If we're over here where it requires sound effects to pick up somebody from, as soon as you hear, as soon as that goes, we know it's becoming an unsafe situation. As soon as there's sound effects, we're throwing the flag. If we can get you from making sound to making no sound, that's great, right? If we can get a caregiver, a frontline caregiver family, right, to be able to get you out of bed. Maybe you're it's dependent, but maybe we deploy some tools and we can take it from here and take it to here. Well, we win. So the goal is so maximal independence is subjective. It's always taking you in this direction, right? In the least restrictive environment. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, we are looking to create a reproducible method of providing care at the lowest skill set possible. I'll tell you a story. Lady in Farmingdale had a she's a neurological progressive disease. It was an ALS, probably an undiagnosed kind of something mimicking ALS, but no one ever kind of put the finger on it, but it's kind of in this space. And she had this very skilled, petite aide who was excellent. She had great body mechanics, and she can, maneuver, and she was safe, and the client was safe, and it was unusual to see this level of skill. So I said, well, let me see how you get into the bathroom. And it was tight, and they got in and out, and I said, all right, well, what happens when Mary's on vacation? She said, well, Mary doesn't go on vacation. And I said, well, what happens when Mary's sick? Well, Mary's not allowed to be sick. And I said, well, just humor me. I'm sure she hasn't been here every day, 365 on Christmas. Who comes? Well, Margie comes. And Margie is not petite, and Margie is not skilled like Mary. I said, well, what happens? She goes, well, we don't shower that day. I said, well, what do you do? She said, well, we have to put, Depends on, or the other, And I said, well, what's this extended period of time? She goes, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know. So the only time that her life is normal is when this one person, all of her life, is built around one point, and if that fails, we're cooked. So this providing care in the lowest skill set possible, it means that it happens all the time, again and again, with consistency at the lowest skill set possible. And that's what we designed to. So we're looking at maximal independence, a reproducible method of providing care. Everybody is safe. The client's safe, the homeowner is safe, the caregiver is safe. If I have to do this while I'm watching something, it's not safe. It's not safe. And then we're looking for a reasonable quality of life. What people tend to do is when they can't do something, they start chopping down their mobility. They start chopping down the things that they do. They start showering less and less because it's just too much. They just say, once I'll take a sponge bath. That's good for camping. For a couple days. But, Teresa,
Tina.
Thank you. Tina, right? And we'll play it later. She said, I'm a girly girl. I want to shower, but do this, right? Just something simple. Just quality of life. I want to be able to get out on my deck. I want to be able to go outside and watch my kids play, my grandkids run. I want to be able to, garden and, build a raised garden and, futz around with the tomatoes or whatever, So these are the four things that any solution, at any discharged home, at any time we're looking at property, this is what we're screening, this. This is the tool. And we're going to use this to do some basic evaluations, some basic solutions. Okay, so like I said earlier, function drives the solution. Your functional ability drives the solution. So here's a quote from a book back in '97, and it says, disability results from the interaction between the characteristics of individuals with potentially disabling conditions and the characteristics of the physical environment. It means that your functional ability and your home, we can make the home work, we can move you over here. I'm not saying your disability disappears, but you become much more empowered in that space. And if you could do it for yourself, then do it for yourself, right? Now, function is the driver, but then everybody has 3 budgets. And those now are the this kind of gets you gross, kind of gets you here, and then there's 3 filters, and that kind of fine tunes things a little bit. Okay. Can you see this from the back, or is it a little too small? Kind of, you can't see it. Oh, it's okay. I'll read it to you. So here's the 4 hallmarks, right? So here's function. And then we have 3 budgets. And everyone thinks initially at your financial budget, and that is absolutely true, right? We have to kind of have that established. What's the financial budget for whatever it is you're doing? But then we also have to look at the time budget. Everyone's always squeezed for time. Everyone tends to wait too long, and things take longer than expected. And I thought it would take 2 weeks, but it really takes 5, and right? But I needed this short. So we have a time budget. And then we have an emotional budget. Construction, just in general, is rough. You have to go through it. And then you layer on top of it all the other things that everybody's dealing with. And we have an emotional budget. So let me put this to a story. A friend of mine, taking his mother-in-law, dealing with some Alzheimer's issues, could not, really was not thriving at home, and they were taking her into their home. They called me in. We went through the functional analysis. We figured out where she was at. We looked at the property. We diagnosed, right? And then we come down and I say, okay, well, you know, Joe, what's your budget for this? For what you know, he kind of voiced out what he wants. He wants to redo his basement. He wants to do a garage addition. He wants to, you know, convert this and new kitchens and lay this out. And I'm going through this and I'm like, okay. And I said, well, you know, what's the budget? And he said, well, you know, about $100,000. And I said, okay, we're gonna have to probably cut back half of what you just talked about. And he says, you're kidding me. I says, oh. I said, you know, if that's your budget, 100 grand, then we have to build to this, right? So then I start talking. As I'm talking, I'm asking questions. And I'm listening to the wife talk about her mother, about taking her into the home, and we're just barely scratching the surface, and she's an emotional wreck. And I said, oh, no. Be really careful what we're taking on here. Maybe we just keep scaling. I keep peeling it back and scaling it back and scaling. And they said, well, you know, when can I get permits by? And I said, well, you know, you're probably, you know, 2-3 months out by the time you make decisions, and, you know, we file and objections, and it comes back, and then you get a bid on it, You're probably, you know, 3 months before you can start, and then you probably have 4 or 5 months worth of work, maybe Christmas. I gotta be in here in 2 months. Not realistic. So everybody has a financial budget, but there's a time budget and there's an emotional budget, right? And so we have to be careful where we spend that and how we spend that. And so that scope of work, then I knew what needed to happen for mom, and I knew what the adult children wanted to do, and then we had to work it down, and eventually these 4 things gave us that scope of work, and the project went off, and it happened. But it was you know, nothing's easy. You know, I don't want to paint rainbows and butterflies, right? But it was a heck of a lot better than pulling in, you know, 3 builders. Nobody has an idea as to what has to happen, and just, you know, going off this budget. Well, you got a mess. That's just a disaster waiting to happen. So what does it help you to do? The tools, right? This statement of work, or the scope of work, right, gives you a tailor-fit solution. Right? We look at function, time frames, emotional toleration, and your financials. Now, what it also does is it helps you to get commensurate pricing. Without it, you're comparing apples to oranges. Right? We had a client in Douglaston, and mom slipped over here in Kings Park, and she had a traumatic brain injury. So she's moving out of Kings Park and coming back with the daughter. And it was a garage at grade, and the first floor was just an open basement. You know, I don't know, a little bigger than the size of this clinic. You know, decent space. Just mechanicals in the corner, and just concrete, that's it. And if you would have brought 3 builders in and just said, give me a bid on making an apartment for mom, is who's right? What price is right? How do you compare the two? And this is the homeowner, right? This is no knowledge of construction, nothing, right? I mean, they're babes in the woods here. Is anyone right? And then how do you compare the number? You just don't know. But if you have a set of documents, it's not always going to be pinpoint accuracy. One guy says I could do it in 4 months, the next guy says no way, it's going to take 7, and so maybe labor rates are different and whatnot. Variables are limited, but you know you're comparing apples to apples the best you can. You've defined the right kind of amount of tile, and the specs on the tile, and the drain that you're going to use, and the space that's going to be created, and everybody's coming in and bidding the same thing, right? I mean, wouldn't that be a dream if everybody came in and bid the same thing? It just never happens. Mm-hmm. Never happens. So this helps you to defend your financial means. Okay? Okay, so caregiving, we have got 2 kind of pools of solutions. The simple, right, which is dominated here, right? Simple is our demarcation line. Supervision, contact guard, minimal assistance. That's really when you probably don't need a lot of construction. We could probably take things off the shelf. We could probably deploy some things that just make life a little easier, right? But those 4 things we talked about are still valid.
Does
Independence.
everybody know what these 3 terms mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
All right, so when somebody needs to be supervised, very simple, you just say, okay, we're gonna
We're close, right? Within arm's reach. We're just kind of keeping an eye on you, right? Contact guard, maybe we got our hand on the small of their back, and we're just kind of, moving with them, right? Minimal assist, there's probably some type of, there's no sound effects typically. Just a little bit of a, right? Maybe the balance is off, and maybe we're up here like this, and we're in here like this, and maybe she's a little wobbly, and we'll dance a little bit, right? So just light things. Maybe, and usually where I see the things deployed are changes of grade. The 3 steps to get in the home, you can't handle the step, maybe you need a ramp. You have some stairs to get up. You live in a split, you can put a stair lift in. You're in the bathroom, you need some kind of simple solution to get in and out of the tub. Because you really don't want to, and that's the other thing too, right? When we're sitting about here, and you're dealing with something that's progressive, and it's not quite involved yet, we spend the money, we're not sure. When do we pull the trigger? Does it make sense? Am I losing this battle? Am I giving up? Right? So all these things kind of come into play. So, but this here, minimal assistance, contact guard, and supervision becomes the demarcation line. But we still evaluate things the same way. I put that sucker down. Oh yeah, thank you. See, she's hiding it on me. Minimal assist. Okay, so everyone's familiar with the transfer bench? This thing, right? Has everyone seen this? The therapist showing this thing? Nothing? Right? OT, I'm sorry, what was your name in the back? Karen. This thing here, right? And it's just full of, overpriced medical gear. You need a, toothbrush out of here, it's $27, right? So, where'd it go? Oh, wrong way. Now, this is great because the transfer bench, how many people have a bathroom that is that spacious? Does anybody on Long Island have a bathroom that is that spacious? There's nothing around that bathtub? No. Go like this in the shower. Right? Now, this is actually the appropriate client for this transfer bench. Short term, maybe he blew his knee playing tennis or whatever. Right? He's got some musculature, both arms are working well, he's popping over, no problem. This is marketing in a studio someplace and not reality. This is reality. And we're trying, right? And this is what we see all the time, right, on discharge, Carol? Yeah, use that 3-in-1 commode. Right? That's a nightmare. That is not long-term solutions. This is like short-term. How is anyone in there, who's going in there?
Well, that's not even short-term.
Right. That is, so we go through this, right? And we say, okay, we come over here and we say, we're looking at, right? We're looking at independence. We're looking at caregiving. We're looking at safety. And we're looking at quality of life. All right, well, is the person going to be somewhat independent in here? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's a game of Twister in here. Are they safe? Definitely not. That water is coming to that floor all day, every day. And then towels get thrown down, and you have a rolling walker or some device, and then you're trying to put another body in there with the caregiver. No. Just no. Short term, maybe, in a pinch, but as the long-term solution, I'll tell you no. Now, I want to give you full disclosure on this. The transition shower is something that we use these 4 things to design something that we feel is a simple solution for folks in this space over here. we don't install it. We have got certified installers on the island that do this. You know, this is our product that we've designed, so I just give you full disclosure that we are connected to this financially. But my point here is not to sell you anything, but to show you something that is out of the box thinking, right? The bathroom's always a problem, but we deploy a, kind of a standard bathtub here, and in a day, right, time, we're looking at budget, we're looking at cost, we're looking at emotion, and we're saying, how do we go from here without ripping everything out and getting involved in a $15,000 or $20,000 bathroom renovation that's going to take a week or two, and no one has any patience for this. Can we get it done in a day at a fraction of the cost, right? Can we get it done and it's really not affecting everybody? And what we did is we've been able to modify, the installers cut this out in a day, and there's some specialty grab bars, and this here sticks out into space, and a bench that folds up over here. And in a day, you go from here to here. Now, what is something like this done? It's given, we've moved from here to here. The caregiver has been able to do this, could be anybody, right? We're not lifting legs over, and over here in this instance, if this is your long wall and your right upper extremity is maybe non-functional, a normal grab bar, that doesn't help. But this here, out into space with a good strong arm, we can grab, we can stand, we can move, right? And slide across. Everything's contained inside the shower. No water hits the floor, or, nominal, very little. And so, by utilizing and understanding that min-assist, contact guard, supervision, right? And then going through these 4 pieces, we can look at and say, well, does a transfer bench make sense, or does something like this make sense? And so, right, this is, before dealing with this and water all over the place and a mess, and that's the same bathroom afterwards. And then one day, we'll go back to Tina, and we'll see what she says.
One of the things you said to me the first time we met, and I have never forgotten it, you said the reason you formed this company was to keep families together for as long as they could be. And there is no doubt in my mind, the reality of my situation is, had it not been for this transitional shower, I could not have remained with my family, because there was no option. Sponge bathing would not have been an option. It wouldn't have, not even say, well, I don't like to do it. Physically, it would not have worked.
Right.
So truly, if we say the number one benefit of this shower is I am able to stay in my house with my family.
Right. So something simple, quick in and out, a fraction of the price, her life is different. And if you remember earlier, what she was saying is just make it work so that I have more energy for my family. Right? So, but it'll apply to, let's say it's a stair lift, right? And we get a set of stairs. And a little wobbly. So, we get a rail, right? That's going to come up here like this, right? And then our seat over here like this. And then let's just say there's a door here. So I want to make this practical for you. What I've seen some salesmen do is say, well, we can stop this rail here and not come down into this space over here, like this, where it wants to go, because this hinge costs $2,500 extra. Well, let's stop it right here. And so they're expecting the client to step up one step, which they can't do, and then to turn like this, and then sit down and then go up. Versus it coming down and you having the caregiver, the client being able to do what they can do, everybody is safe, quality of life. So we go right down the line and say, does that meet the criteria? And the answer is no. But then we go back and we look at the 3 budgets, right? If $2,500 makes the difference, and really makes the difference, then you have to really, really search hard if that makes the difference. Maybe it does, but at what cost? because if there's an injury that happens here, is it really, that's a hard one, but that's for you to decide. My point is, you have to be able to kind of go down the line and say, am I safe? Is the caregiver safe? Can they do this themselves? What is this going to take on the homeowners, the caregiver's part, right? So we evaluate this. And then we look into the complex, right? And that's when caregiving remains the gauge, and we go from moderate assist now is really when we're starting to make sound effects. And maximal assist is really when you are doing almost everything, and there's really minimal participation by the client. And then dependency is, they're just dependent, right? So that's really when you are going to need, really that's probably when you're going to be looking at more significant, something substantial. We're into this for about what? How are we doing on time?
It's 10 after 7.
So we should be wrapping up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we'll skip that. We'll skip this one piece. So I want to talk about having a plan, especially in a progressive situation. You may not have any functional immobility. Function may be okay. You may not, you may be doing everything for yourself, but you know that you kind of have this, you have this diagnosis. Well, to have a plan in play to say, if we get to, I start making sound effects, I have to deploy this and do it up front. And because it's the chaos, right? It's the chaos that, oh my God, Mary fell last night and now there's a fracture on top of the disease process. Or Harry got the flu and he's been knocked on his back and it's exacerbated. And now oh my God, what am I going to do? Right? But we don't ever want to be in the, what am I going to do? You want to be in the fallback position to say, okay, we got it covered. Right? So you may have something called a residential transition plan drawn up, where you say, okay, we're here, and you go through the same process we talked about, and you just put a plan to act, and you say, okay, well, I'm here, and I want to be able to do this, and what are some minor things I can employ now, and then if it goes to here, then what are we going to do? And it's already you're already kind of talking it through. And to have that in play and to pull it off the shelf later, invaluable. So we had a client over here in St. James who was at the clinic at UMass, right? Is it UMass? Mm-hmm. So every Thursday he'd take the ferry across with his wife. He had been, wrestling with the disease process for a while, and so he converted his formal living room into a master suite. And he was still able to do for himself, but he was getting ahead of it. One of the rare proactive guys that was getting ahead of it. So he did his bathroom and he figured it out. And I said, your wife is the primary, and you really need to think about, my job is to have the hard conversation and say, I need to have some dedicated lines for, other electronics that need to be in here, whether it be suction or other electronics that, if you're down in here, we're going to provide care, that we're not pulling wire at the last minute, that it's here, right? So we're thinking that piece through. And then I said, well, you may also come to the point where you need a ceiling lift. So why don't we put the blocking in the wall now, and we know where that's going to go, and we're just kind of thinking all of this through. Because if it happens, we don't want to be scrambling again, right? Right? Yeah. For the sake of time, I'll skip that. Did this make sense?
I'm just going to equate this to like a wheelchair. We send people to a wheelchair clinic. We don't just send them to the wheelchair store or the scooter store or to the drugstore. We want you to go to a wheelchair clinic that we know understands the disease process, and we know that right now you might not need something to lift your feet, or you might not need something to hold your head, or you might not need to tilt. But years down the line you may, and that wheelchair clinic is going to know it. And they'll filter it all in to the original wheelchair so that you have this wheelchair for the duration instead of having some that's not working because you didn't go to a wheelchair clinic. You went to the guy at the end of the block that sells wheelchairs.
Right.
That doesn't know anything about ALS.
Right. And my point is not to put down any one area of the process, because I look at this, you know, when I was in the hospital, we would round in the intensive care unit. You'd have respiratory, and you'd have rehab, and you'd have the intensivist, and you'd have nursing, and